So far, great to be here with you for our last session. Just quickly see who remembers where we left off yesterday. How many of you were with us yesterday and can remember what we were looking at before we closed up the day? Can anybody remember? Yeah, we were looking at writing task 2. How many different topics are there or possibilities of topic types are there for writing task 2? So Harizan has said 7. That's the correct answer. When you type in your answers, there's a little tab there and it says 2, and you can change it from all panelists to all panelists and attendees, and then everybody can read it. So we were looking at the first 2. I think that we managed to have a look through. And what I wanted to do to start us off today is to have a look at the rest. So we've got another 5 that we want to have a look at. And then we want to launch straight into IELTS writing task 1. So let's have a look at some of the different topics that we didn't get a chance to look at yesterday. So here we have a topic where we're required to give the advantages and disadvantages. So this is going to be a 50-50 type of essay. Have a look at it. Have a look at the question. What are the key words that you see here? What are the things that we need to do in order to be able to understand the task? So we've got those critical questions that we need to ask ourselves. And obviously, as has been said, computers. This essay is essentially about computers. And it's also about school lessons. So it's not just computers, it's about computers being used at school. And we've got a word that's pretty heavy in being essential or an essential part. So it's not just about using computers, it's about using computers as an essential part. Can anybody give us a synonym for essential? And we've got significant, important, must have. I think that must have, vital. That's another good word there. Vital part. So must have. You can't do without it. So computers are becoming an essential, a must have at school lessons. Is this good or is this bad? And here we've been told to discuss both the advantages and the disadvantages. So I can see that many people are saying, yeah, we think it's good. But what we need to do is we need to give a balanced view. We need to go 50-50 on this. And again, just going back, often when we get a topic like this, we read it and we really can't see any of the negative aspects that could possibly come out from, from computers in the classroom. What could possibly be negative about that? It's technology, we're moving forward. everything is rosy, good. Why would we want to look at the disadvantages of computers? And so what people will do is that they'll write a nice big chunky paragraph on how it's bad, how it's good, and then they'll write a small paragraph on how it's bad, and that paragraph tends to get underdeveloped. So let's see if anybody can come up with an idea about why computers could bring disadvantages. So we've got health. Are there any other reasons why computers could possibly be a disadvantage? So Dimash is telling us it's a distraction. Eyesight, that would be health. Possibly addiction. Okay, and great. So we've got a whole lot of negatives coming through. That's great. Plagiarism. It's expensive to buy computers. Yeah. So what all of these ideas are out there. We just need to think a little bit. Try to imagine the situation. Try to imagine the situation in our school. Try to imagine the situation in a school which is a little bit more disadvantaged. And then we start to get some ideas. And if you are able to make a balanced essay and keep it balanced throughout, that could really assist you in being able to raise your coherence and cohesion score. So here we've been asked to give our own opinion. Remember, we don't need to give an extra paragraph for that. All of our arguments are our opinion. But in the introduction, in the second sentence of the introduction and in our conclusion, we will clearly state that we do see that there are both advantages and disadvantages of computers in the classroom. And I've said advantage, obviously, we get exposed to technology, which is great. For example, typing at work. So if somebody doesn't have access to a computer at school, what will happen, or at home, they'll come to work with their pencil and everybody will be like, no, you need a laptop. But they're going to be very, very slow at typing. That's no good. So exposing kids to computers allows them to experience that technology, which is used everywhere in the workplace. Disadvantage, I went with expensive, which was, again, one of the things that many of you put up there, was that computers are expensive, and that puts some schools at a disadvantage. So if they're becoming essential to school lessons, if the program is based on computers and we don't have computers, that means that we're going to fall behind and our school is going to lag behind. And so what's going to happen is that the school doesn't have a budget for computers, or it doesn't have a budget for an IT department, and then that school's going to be severely at a disadvantage. So when all of the students are applying to NU, Nazarbayev University, and obviously the kids from that school, which didn't have computers, which were an essential part of school lessons, aren't going to be able to apply for that university, which wouldn't be good. Okay, so there we've got a discussion-based essay. It's asking us to give our opinion. We can throw that into the introduction, into the conclusion, and it's just one sentence, really, as we demonstrated before. You don't have to write a whole paragraph or 2 sentences on what your opinion is, and your opinion is put forward very lightly. You're not pushing that opinion. it's just one sentence saying, obviously there are two sides and both of them have good and bad. Let's have a look at another question. This is another discussion-led question. So have a look at this one. And what is this about? What is this question about? What are our key words which we need to circle? So let's read it out. Some people think that the government should establish free libraries in each town. Others believe that it is a waste of money since people can access the internet at home to obtain information. Yeah, so we've got free libraries. That's definitely, well, really libraries is our key word here. That's what we're really looking at. We're looking at libraries versus what? Rosanna said it, internet at home. Yeah. And what's our aim with using a library? Obtain information. Thank you, Tolkien. That sounds good. Obtain information. So what do we need? We need libraries, or do we need internet at home to obtain information? So hopefully some people are saying waste of money. So I think we really could contrast that as well. That is something that is, so we've got libraries are free, and then we've got a waste of money. And we're kind of contrasting those two ideas. If you put that in there, it would be good. There's another key word. Who are we really looking at? Who's responsible for all of this? Is it people themselves, or is it some other institution? Yeah, it's the government. So we definitely need to think of it from the perspective of a government. So the government has this extra money. Should they build libraries, or should they put it towards other things? Because it's a waste of money. And we all have internet at home, so what's the need for libraries? What are some of the synonyms for government? I think government is one of those words you probably don't want to be using too many synonyms for. Muldir has said state. What starts to happen? Authorities. It's not really the government. Administration again won't be officials. That's not really the government anymore there. And this is one of those ones, you'd be better off just using the government. There's no real need to look for a synonym there. The government is a government. The moon, what are synonyms for the moon? What are synonyms for the sun? There really aren't any synonyms for the sun. And if you say the bright yellow star which shines from the heavens and gives us light and nourishment, it's going to sound incredibly awkward. Why didn't you just say the sun? Yeah, so some of these words we really don't need synonyms for. I think government is one of those. A government is a government. A library is a library. Internet is the internet. We don't need synonyms for everything. It's okay to use some of the words which are in the prompt because it's necessary. Those words are necessary, and there aren't really any good synonyms for them. So don't worry too much about synonyms in those occasions. Where I would be looking for synonyms would be with things like words like some people think. Obviously, there's a lot of synonyms, a lot of different ways that you can phrase that. Establish. There's obviously a lot of different synonyms and different ways that could be paraphrased, and that's what we would really be looking for in terms of looking for synonyms. And again, in the past, there was a lot more. The examiners would penalize more when people lifted the rubric. That no longer really is the case. Lifting rubric is kind of to a large extent ignored at the moment. So obviously you don't want to copy the whole rubric, but you don't need to paraphrase it all that much in your essay. So we've thought about the keywords. We can kind of see what this essay is all about. People are thinking that libraries are no longer necessary because we have internet, and if the government is going to put those libraries in, it is going to be a waste of money. And we have to discuss both sides and give your own opinion. So again, since we're discussing both sides and we want to have a nice balanced essay, what we're going to do is we're going to say that there's definitely positives and negatives. And now, what do you all think if you had a choice to vote for your government to build more libraries or put that money elsewhere? Because you don't need to get information from the library. You'll get information from the internet. Which side would you normally choose? So Dana is saying that she likes libraries because you can go there and really concentrate. Zania has said the first, she's quite into libraries. Like libraries that are open 24 hours. So people, you're quite keen on libraries, I see, which is interesting. I very rarely go to a library. That could be because I am not studying at the moment. But I think even if I was studying, I would find all my information on the internet or on an online library. I wouldn't look in the library for physical books. And in my studies, which I completed over 10 years ago, even at that time, I was still not using libraries. I was using online journal catalogs rather than books, and I was using electronic books. I didn't use the library at all. Okay, but we're going to take a balanced view. We're going to look at this from a real 50-50 perspective. So we're going to whack out a 50-50. And I've said that I've decided to flip it because I really feel that this argument for me is clearly internet is a new source of information. At least I feel that way, that if anybody wants to find out information nowadays, they just go to Google and search it. Nobody is going to walk all the way to the library to answer their question of, well, basically whatever question that pops to their mind, and they want to do a little bit of research, find out about it. Why not just Google it in? And you've got the online encyclopedia, Wikipedia, and when I was a kid, we had an encyclopedia at home. All those encyclopedias are gone now. You can just Google it. It's much faster. And you can even watch a video on it if you jump on YouTube. So for me, it seems at least that internet is a new source of information. And that's what I would be putting in my first argument. And I would give the example of online libraries. Then I would move into my second paragraph, and I would be talking about how libraries have changed, and that libraries have a lot of computers nowadays. And so I think somebody mentioned it in a chat there before, was that computers are for some people don't have a computer, or some people don't have internet. So I still think that we need libraries, because a lot of people, mainly older people and people from disadvantaged backgrounds, might not have computers. And in order for them to be able to do research and go to the library, they would have the internet there. That's just one example. Obviously, libraries have changed a lot, and they're not just for reading books or studying. The library around the corner from our place has meeting rooms. There's also various council information which is provided in the library. So they've basically taken several various dying kind of institutions and merged them all together, and that way kept them alive for a little bit longer. In the future, I do think that we won't have these libraries as we have them now. I think everything will go online. That's my opinion. But in this essay, it doesn't matter. I have to be 50-50. So I decided to really believe that libraries have changed and that they're still needed, and that they give computers for those who don't have them. And that's one of the things that you have to do in your essay. When you give an argument and you give a balanced 50-50 essay, you have to believe in your argument. Even if you don't actually believe in it, you have to back it up. Obviously, if I was responsible for giving away free money, I would never give it away to free libraries. I would put it towards getting internet to everybody's home. But this is a balanced essay. It's a 50-50 essay. And so I'll change my opinion just for this IELTS essay. It's not going to change my life, which is fine. And I think that's a point that should be made, is that often when we get emotional essays, emotional essay topics, especially ones that trigger people, one that triggers people in Kazakhstan is if you give an essay about tradition. For some reason, tradition, anything that has the word tradition in it, really triggers people. And they almost get really defensive, and they feel they have to fight for their culture, fight for their identity, and which is great. You do have to fight for it, but just save the fight for another place, not the IELTS essay. Another one that can really trigger and often gets used as well is when we compare men and women. And that, for some reason, triggers people immensely. And people feel that, no, women can do everything. And it just becomes a big rant about feminism or anything of that sort, which is great. When you're having a discussion with friends, have a big rant. But in the IELTS essay, especially when you've been asked to discuss both views, try to be as balanced as possible. Don't get triggered by the question. So, for example, if we took something to the extreme and said, what are some people believe that eating pork is good for their health. Others believe that it is not good for people to eat. Discuss both sides and give your own opinion. Obviously, that's going to be difficult. I don't eat pork. It's forbidden in my religion. And I start to get triggered. Of course, it's evil. Of course, it's bad. We should all stop eating pork. Obviously, that's not going to help me to give a nice, balanced essay. So what we need to do, just calm down and try and think of some of the possible good reasons. Maybe a possible good reason that you might not believe in. But just back it up for the sake of the essay and move on. That's really a big tip there. Don't get triggered. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to move into one of these cause and effect essays. But I just have read a comment from Kimbat, and Kimbat has said pork is cheaper than other meat. And there you go. There's something that you can really pick up on, and you can run it out and say, you know, for people who are struggling, eat pork. It's cheaper meat. You get your protein at a lower price. Obviously, you don't believe that. You wouldn't tell your friends that. That's fine. No problem. But it's just an essay, and you don't need to make a big deal out of your own personal opinions. Okay, so let's have a look at this cause and effect essay, and we've got housing and accommodation has become a major problem in many countries around the world. What are the main factors that have contributed to this problem, and what can be done to help reduce the number of homeless people? Okay, so we're already running straight into it. We've got, it's all about housing, this essay. Accommodation, what could be accommodation? What are some of the, what is meant by accommodation? If it's not housing, what could it be? Apartments are housing, flats are housing. What could be accommodation? Can you give me a concrete example of what could be accommodation? But that wouldn't be housing. That wouldn't be a house, a flat. Yeah, so we got hostel, a hostel, Arman, yeah, that would be correct. That would be an accommodation. A dormitory. Apart from that, can we think of any other? Sometimes there's temporary housing, shelters, especially when it comes to homeless people or people people suffering from domestic abuse. The government often has shelters. Then we could think about tents. So tents, that's not really housing, but sometimes people have to live in tents. For example, refugees or asylum seekers, they live in tents. So that would be accommodation for them. And so we're not just talking about housing, we're talking about any type of accommodation, but we're going to really focus on housing here. So it's become a major problem, and we're going to be talking about around the world. And now what we're going to look at, so that's our theme that we're going to be talking about. That's the overarching theme. Now what we want to have a look at is we want to have a look at what's contributed to the problem. So we're going to have a look at what the problem is, and we're going to be looking at the solution. But the solution is going to be very specific. It's going to be about homeless people. So the problem isn't in relation to homeless people, but the solution is. So we want to see what can help reduce the number of homeless people. Is this essay asking you for an opinion? Shirin has, by the way, asked a very good question. She said, if I don't understand, what should I write about if I have problems understanding the meaning of the topic? I would suggest don't start writing until you can understand the meaning of the topic. And circle as many words as you can. Think through some of the think through some of the key words, and only then start writing. And again, it depends on what kind of score you're after, but you're not going to score 6 or above if you haven't understood the topic. If you've misunderstood the topic, it's really looking like something around a 5 and below. Possibly at the very best, a 5.5. And that is why we really start with understanding a topic. If we haven't understood it, we've pretty much blown our chances in getting a high grade. So what causes a shortage of housing? What are some of the factors? Okay, so we've got high costs. We've got overcrowding. What are some of the other problems? Why is there a shortage of housing in many places? And we've got migration. Sultan has said migration. Where exactly from? Migration from where? Expensive, yeah. Houses are getting very, very expensive. People don't have work. So we've got urbanization. Salaries aren't high enough. Possibly currency. We've got poverty. We've got refugees. There's a whole range of issues. All we have to do is find one issue and really expand on that issue. So we've got migration from danger zones. We've got migration from villages. A lot of people are leaving their villages behind because the work is in the cities. And then obviously that then puts strain on the whole society. So we don't need an opinion, as was mentioned before. We move straight into our first argument. My argument, what I'm going to be arguing is that the main factors that have contributed to this problem is urbanization. I'm going to give an example. For example, Astana or Nur Sultan. So back in the days, or maybe even 10 years ago, when I was in Kazakhstan, first moved to Kazakhstan, I had a friend and he went to Astana, and he said, "Oh, you know what? I really loved Astana. There were no traffic jams, and at that time there were big roads and no cars on the roads, and he thought that was a great place to go to." Obviously, anybody who lives in Astana today is well aware that the traffic there is horrendous, just as in any other big city. So we can see that there's been a massive migration of people from all over Kazakhstan who have moved into Astana, even over the last 10 years. And obviously, with so many people moving in, you're going to have major problems with housing and accommodation. London is another example where the prices are absolutely through the roof. And any big city really is going to be, any city that has a huge population is probably experiencing the effects of urbanization. Then what we want to have a look, what can be done to help reduce the number of homeless people? And that doesn't necessarily correlate with urbanization. However, it could be one of the side effects of urbanization. It's not really all that linked together, but neither are those two questions. And what we're doing is we're answering each question separately. So our first paragraph is going to be about the main factors that have contributed to this problem. And you could well put in 2 factors if you wanted to. And then you could say what can be done to help reduce the numbers of homeless people. And I've said government housing. I believe that is a great thing. And I would give the example of the success of government housing in the UK, and that has helped keep people off the streets. And I would probably give a nice example of older people who are on pensions, who haven't been able to buy their house, and the government buys out these and builds these big flats and rents them to the pensioners for very, very low prices, therefore keeping the people off the street. And I believe that is a great example of how we could reduce the number of homeless people. Somebody's asking, what is EG? That's short for example. So that's my example. So in your plan, that's what you're doing. You're really thinking through the question. You're highlighting those key words. You're making sure you understand the question. And then you're looking at coming up with your 2 ideas. Once I have these 2 ideas, all I'm doing is I'm just putting the body together. I'm really able to concentrate on writing my introduction, coming up with a fancy opening sentence, not putting in an opinion sentence. So my introduction will only have 2 sentences, the opening sentence and the thesis statement. So I'll put in my thesis statement and I'll launch straight into my paraphrase. So one of the many factors that has contributed to the problem of a shortage of accommodation is urbanization. I'll explain what I mean by urbanization. I'll give a clear example, which I already have, and I can maybe write about Astana, give my example there, and then just give a concluding thought. I'll then move straight into some of the things that can be done to reduce the number of homeless people, which I believe the best example available is government housing. I'll explain what I mean by government housing, then I'll give an example of the success in the UK, give a nice closing sentence to the paragraph and move straight into the conclusion. Say that urbanization has caused the problems of, or has added a huge amount of pressure and caused cities to swell. The government can help homeless people or can help reduce the number of homeless people by building government housing within big cities, and that will help ease the problem. And then if I have time, I can think of a nice closing sentence and leave everything off. So see, once I've thought through the plan, all I'm doing is I've got the skeleton, I'm just throwing on meat. And that's not going to take me a lot of time. And when I'm not thinking about ideas, I'm able to really clearly focus on what grammar and what vocabulary I'll be using. So that's a lot. I think we did a seminar in a school one time, and there were 150 students, 180 students, grade 12 students who wanted to take the IELTS. And we ran a seminar for them, and we talked about planning. And then we walked around the room looking at who had actually written a plan. And I think 80% of people, even after we talked about how important planning is, didn't have a plan in front of them. They just gone straight to writing the introduction. And that's why I can't stress enough. You must plan. So here we go. It's another, I think this essay is slightly different. It's a cause and effect. So in many countries today, insufficient respect is shown to older people. So what are the reasons for this, and what problems might this cause in society? So very similar to the other question, except we're not looking for any solutions. We've got an effect here. So let's have a look at what we're really looking at as the issue in this essay. So what are the key words? Yeah, well, there's hit it. Insufficient respect, and we're talking about older people. Yeah, and older people. What would that mean? Older people. Seniors. Exactly. So we're really looking at the older generation. Arman, not people after 30, please. I wouldn't want to consider myself an old person. But yeah, you're looking at grandfathers, grandmothers, those type of people. So insufficient respect is shown. We want to know the reasons why and the cause on society, not on individuals, not about the old grandfather being a bit annoyed about what's happened, but we want to how it actually causes an effect on society at large. Yeah, retired people, that would also be correct. Obviously, most people's grandfathers and grandmothers are retired. So Aruzan, that would be that would be correct. Older people, retired people. So again, we don't need an opinion in this essay. And I've said the reason why I think that older people don't get as much respect as in the past is because technology has progressed. Older people are now, in actual fact, many a time less knowledgeable than younger people, because younger people have access to the internet, whereas older people rely mainly on the traditions which they have learnt. Younger people can get, those traditions have been passed on through a very limited amount of people. I can now go and have a look at on the internet, or I can go and travel and find out a whole lot more information, and I can actually come out knowing more than an older person. Whereas in the past, the older a person was, the more they had traveled, the more people they had met, the more people they'd have talked to, and as a result, older people, the older a person would have been, the more respect they would have naturally deserved because of their knowledge. That has changed, and I think that the cause to society is that older generations get neglected, and that's a bit of a problem, because when there is insufficient respect to older people, what starts happening is that people start putting their parents or their grandmothers and grandfathers into things like care homes. So that's what I'm going to argue. It might not be the best idea, but it's going to do for an essay. So I'm going to say that older generation people stop really respecting them. They're kind of not really needed anymore. And so as people feel that there's less need for them, they start to push them off into the fringes of society, and eventually they get put into places like care homes, retirement villages, and they're kind of neglected, and as are their needs. And it could become a bit of a sad story. The last one I want to have a look at is, did you write answers for these direct questions in separate paragraphs? So yeah, every one of these would be a paragraph. So technology, so this question here will give one paragraph. You can write 2 paragraphs if you want to. And the second question will also be 1 paragraph. And again, you can write 2 paragraphs, especially if you don't have as many words in your paragraphs. Ideally, if you're a 7, you would want to write 2 paragraphs. If you're a 6 or below, you might want to write 3, 3, possibly 4. And as I explained yesterday, that yeah, the lower a person's level, the shorter the sentences. And when people have shorter sentences, obviously the paragraphs will be shorter. However, don't go and write more sentences in your paragraphs, because then your paragraphs will become incoherent. So rather than writing a 10-sentence paragraph, stick to the structure that I gave you, which would be no more than 4 sentences. And if that's not giving you the word count, write another argument. Basically, every paragraph equals an argument. Okay, so our last question for part 2, and then we'll move into part 1, is this what we call a mixed question? And again, it gets tackled in a very similar way to the last 2 questions that we looked at. So every question becomes a paragraph. Now, another thing that I notice sometimes people do is that we've got a topic like this. Today, food travels thousands of miles from the farm to the consumer. And so they will then start writing a paragraph about how food travels 1,000 miles. And they'll say, yes, nowadays food no longer comes from the backyard, the farm, but it comes from other countries, and they'll just go on and on about this sentence. This sentence is a fact. Now, what you're doing is you're responding to that fact. You don't need to restate the fact apart from your opening sentence. There's no need to restate it. All you're doing is you're writing about why this trend is happening, and you're giving a positive. You're saying whether it's positive or negative. So our key words here. What are we really looking at? This one's fairly easy. We're looking at food, and we're looking at how it travels. We'd probably want to have a look at farm and consumer. There would be 2 kind of words there that we'd want to be paying attention to it. We want to answer the question why, and we want to say whether it's positive or negative. So a very simple question. So somebody's written a question. Let me see if I can read it quickly. Is it going to affect my mark, task achievement, if I understand the topic differently than most candidates or examiners would? For example, I might have a little non-ordinary vision of shopping habits, way different from that of the examiner expected. Yeah, now look, that does happen. Somebody has this kind of like really out of the box essay, and that's fine. Usually you rarely find out of the box essays. For some reason, every country, they basically give exactly the same answers. And we used to mark scripts from one place. So, you'd go to Aktaber, you'd conduct a test there, and then one examiner would be sitting there and marking the whole NIS Aktaber, they'd be making whatever 80 scripts or 100 scripts from Aktabe, and it just gets so boring because for some reason you'd get 100 people in the room. They didn't talk, they didn't discuss anything, but they'd give exactly the same idea. How it happens, I'm not sure. But nowadays, your answers kind of get thrown into a system, which then disperses it out to a whole range of examiners. So examiners get to see a little bit more of a variety of answers. However, even then, you still get batches from a particular region, and the answers are usually all the same. So if you do find an answer that is a little bit more abstract, it is actually quite interesting to read. But however, in saying that, the answer must be on topic. So even if it might not be what I would generally think, as long as it's on topic, you'll be okay. So I hope that's answered your question. So food. Now in this one here, do we need an opinion? That's my question. Do we need an opinion in this one? And we're a bit mixed. Some people are saying yes, no, yes, no. Yeah. So look, is it a positive or a negative trend? That really there is asking you for your opinion. So I've decided to say 50-50. And that's because I'm gonna say that the reason it's happening is largely positive, but I'm going to say that I believe it's actually a negative trend. And so why is this happening? I'm going to argue the reason why food is traveling so far is obviously globalization. And I'm going to give the example of bananas. So everybody in Kazakhstan has eaten banana, and I think everybody in Kazakhstan enjoys eating bananas. However, I've never seen a banana tree in Kazakhstan. So we have banana trees in Australia, but I've never seen banana trees in Kazakhstan. So generally speaking, I'm sure that everybody thinks that it's great that something that grows in Africa or South America or Australia can be eaten in a place where it can't be grown. Now, Nur Sultan is going to go and plant one tomorrow, a banana tree, which is great. I'm not sure where you're going to plant it because in the winter, that banana tree will be gone. Banana trees need very warm tropical weather. But because of globalization, we can eat these bananas all around the world. And I'm in the UK right now. There's no bananas here, no banana trees here, but yet I can go out there and buy bananas. And not only can I buy bananas, but I can buy them for the same price that I can buy them in Australia. So obviously at times bananas are really cheap in Australia, but generally speaking, the price here in the UK and the price in Australia, there's not that much difference. So that's great. And that's why I've decided to go 50-50 on this essay. And I really push that forward. That globalization is great. We can enjoy great things from different countries, for example, bananas. But then I'm going to go and say there is a negative side to that. And I believe it is a negative trend because of the spread of disease. So my example there would be the swine flu. So when I was living in China last year in 2018-19, there was a huge spread of swine flu. It actually killed more than half of the pigs in China. And Chinese eat a lot of pork. That's probably their main meat. They don't like lamb. They can't afford beef, and they eat pork. And half of their pigs died because of swine flu. Now, this swine flu didn't originate in China, unlike the coronavirus. And that swine flu actually came from another part of the world. And because of globalization, China got affected by this swine flu, and it wiped out their pigs. And basically, one of the things about bananas nowadays is that people are saying if something happens to the banana that we know today, those long kind of bananas that everybody's aware of, if something happens, if a disease happens, because of globalization, there'll be no way to contain that disease, and that disease will spread across continents and could possibly wipe out the banana as we know it today. So that's pretty scary. That's something that we would want to avoid. Okay, so let's finish up there with task 2. And let's move on into part 1. I think because of time, we're not there at the prize just yet. Sorry, guys. Let's just start from the beginning. All right. So writing task 1, it's a little bit different, or it's actually entirely different than task 1. And that's, as we noticed yesterday in our questions, in our quiz, that TR and TA. So that we've got task achievement here in task 1. So basically what you get is you get either basically you get some kind of data, and you have to analyze that data. And for some reason, it's quite difficult for people, and not just English learners. It's something that's difficult for people in general. And this is where a lot of people get caught out. Native speakers, they think, oh, my English is great. I'm not going to take an IELTS preparation course. I'm just going to sit down and take the test. And they sit down and they get some kind of data, and they're required to analyze it and basically give some kind of response to it. And they find it incredibly difficult, and they get quite a low mark. And we do see at times a script will come through that has, almost perfect grammar, great vocabulary, yet the task hasn't been achieved. And so what we want to have a look at today is why some tasks aren't achieved, and what we can do in order to be able to achieve the task. So basically, we've been asked to summarize information. So we get the visual data, we have to provide the written data. So we want to select the main features, we want to report those main features, and we want to make some relevant comparisons where possible. So we're given 20 minutes for this task, and we've been asked to write about 150 to 170 words. If you write anything less than 150 words in most tasks, you won't have completed the task. So again, as we noted with task 2, start with task 2. Task 1's only worth 33%. So let's move along and have a look at some of the different types of graphs that we can be faced with. So as you can see, there are various graphs that you might come across in your writing part 1. So we've got, as somebody said, we've got bar charts on the right, and we've got line graphs on the left. So here we've got a single variable line graph, and we've got a multi-variable line graph. We've also got exactly the same for the bar graphs. If you have a look at the information, it's exactly the same. So the line graph and the bar graph hold exactly the same information. There's actually no difference. One's been represented as a line graph, the other one's been represented as a bar graph. And if you get a single variable line graph, it actually can be quite difficult to write 150 words. So just based on the graph there, it would be very difficult to write anything more than 4 sentences about that graph. Obviously, when you get a multiple variable line graph, the task becomes different in another way. What happens is it becomes very difficult to write about everything in only writing 150 words. There's some other types of graph that we can get as well. And if you have a look at the graph at the top, what's the difference between that graph and these graphs here? So we studied these a little bit. Now have a look at this graph and tell me what's the real difference between this graph and the other graph. Okay, and so somebody has said static, and we're going to come back to that in a short while. So obviously, here's a couple more examples of graphs that you could possibly face, and we've got basically a comparison bar graph. We've got a table and we've got a pie chart. Sometimes you could get a pie chart and a table, or a pie chart and a graph. It can be combined together. And lastly, we get these diagrams or processes and maps, or flow charts even. And obviously every task has got its own vocabulary. And often, for some reason, people learn dynamic vocabulary, but they don't really learn the comparison vocabulary. They don't learn the vocabulary needed for maps and the vocabulary needed for a flow chart. And yeah, so there is every single type of graph, and there are, I think there are about 7 in total. They ask for a different type of vocabulary, and depending on the information in the graph, you're going to be using different grammar tenses. And I often see IELTS teachers, they want to kind of give people vocabulary and grammar specifically for a task, and learn this vocabulary and learn this grammar and you'll be fine. It doesn't work like that in IELTS. It really is dependent on the information that you're given. Obviously, you can learn some vocabulary and some structures which will help you to analyze this data. We've got a static graph on the left. We've got a dynamic graph on the right. You're going to be using, for the graph on the right, you're going to be using dynamic vocabulary. And dynamic vocabulary will be your rises, your falls. And then what I've seen is that sometimes people use that dynamic vocabulary for a static graph. So we can see that males are at 40%, then there's a 20% rise to females, followed by a sharp drop to under 18s of 40% before there's another 10% or 15% rise to the 18 to 35s. No, it doesn't work like that. It's static. There's no movement there at all. There's no rises. There's no falls in that graph. It's a static graph. What we're doing is we're comparing. And yeah, so let's move into what the steps needed in order to be able to achieve a high mark. But before we do, let's have a look at the criteria. What I'll do is I'll just quickly run through the criteria because of time, and also because we have kind of for Lexis and for grammar, and even for cohesion and coherence, obviously paragraphing isn't quite as important in this task, and the Lexis and the grammar get marked in a quite similar fashion, but task achievement is where it's different. Here we're looking at whether you have summarized the information appropriately, whether you've put in the key features, what kind of comparisons have you made, and have you compared properly and sufficiently. And then we want an overview, and we need main trends, comparisons, stages. Have you included all of them? So I would really recommend have a look at the criteria, the marking criteria. What is actually being required of you in these tasks? Have you written a clear overview or a summary for the report? Coherence and cohesion, as I said, is not, it's just about, again, organizing your information logically, and there's not so much of a necessity to paragraph as there was in part 2. So let's just quickly rush over this and move into the strategy that we would want to use. So basically your task looks like this, and I've basically taken out the graph, and this is your actual task. So what you've been asked to do is spend 20 minutes on the task, and then you get this piece of information from the graph. Now, I've taken it out for all of the examples that I'll be giving you. I'm actually not going to be showing you this because I think this can be a little bit deceptive. You've read this and you think you know what it's about. I would, before looking at this, I would actually have a look at the actual graph itself to try and understand the task. That will make sure that you have understood all of the numbers, everything that is involved in the task. And then you've got this kind of like generic, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant, and write at least 150 words. So here's the graph we're going to be looking at shortly. And before we look at it, let's first have a look at what it is that we need to do in order to succeed in this task. So the first thing that we really need to do, just as in part 2, is understand the task. However, it is a little bit more difficult in task 1. We need to ask ourselves more questions. What is the task about? We want to know what the topic is, what the information is doing, what is happening in the graph. Then we want to have a look at some dates, some times, when and where this information is taking place. The numbers, what do they mean? And lastly, what's unusual or surprising about this task? Again, a lot of people, when they tackle this writing task 1, they fail to do this. They fail to look at the actual task. and understand what is actually happening there before they start writing. And obviously this leads to mistakes. So again, you need to understand the task before you write about it. So let's see what it would actually mean for us. So if you have a look at this task here, what is the task about? We're looking at sales of gold. And what is happening in the graph? So we've seen a bit of fluctuation, yeah. We've seen some rises in sales. We've seen some drops in sales. And when is this information taking place? It's taking place from January to December in 2002. So that is over the course of 1 year, but we're looking specifically at every single month. Now we have some other numbers on the chart, and what do those numbers represent? It's not the cost. It's the earned money. Yeah, so somebody's selling gold in Dubai, and how much money are they earning? And they're earning in millions. So a very profitable business, it seems, unless everybody's doing it, of course. But many people are buying gold. In fact, in Dubai, 200 million, whatever their currency is being sold. And is there anything unusual or surprising about the graph? Anything that you find particularly interesting? Yeah, so there definitely seems to be the highest income in March, and then it kind of slows down. Now, obviously, we've only got 1 year to report on here. It would be very interesting to know whether every year is like this or whether this was a special year, because if every year was like this, it seems that March is a good time to take a little bit of gold and go to Dubai and try and sell it. So let's move along to the next step. And what we want to do is we want to find the key features. So when you look at this graph, what are the key features in this graph? So we've got lowest in July, not just in July, in September as well, yeah? But before we go to July and September, let's move back and have a look at the very beginning of the graph. In January, we've got 200 million. Okay, sorry guys. Actually, what I wanted to show here as well was that basically some of the things that we should be taking note of. So in your graph, you should include the information of millions of dirhams, or however you pronounce their currency, and then you'd be taking a note that what you'd be wanting to note is that you've got from 100 to 350. You'd be wanting to note that there's months, and you'd be wanting to note that it's all about Dubai gold sales. And then we'll move on into identifying the key features. So let me just quickly explain what I mean by the key features. and you're basically looking for the main ingredients of the graph. And there should be about 4 to 6 of them. Sometimes there can be more, sometimes there can be less even. But usually you're looking at about 4 to 6 features of the graph. If you fail to identify all the key features, this is where you'll fail the task, or at least you'll fail the task achievement section of the task. So let's have a look at this graph here and see where are our key features. What are the key ingredients here? What are the things that if you don't mention, you will get penalized for? So we've definitely got that significant rise in March. We do need to mention that there are millions, that we are working in millions. Some people write dollars or pounds, they not paying attention. That's not good. You will get penalized for that. That is a key feature, yes. After March, what are some of the other key features? Yeah, so this one's pretty simple. All we're really looking at is that it started at around 200. And this is really your first key feature is what going to be basically the start of the graph. Because that's really important, isn't it? At the start of the race, who was there? What position did they have? And now we're going to look for the changes. So we can see that there's a very steep change. It's gone from 200. It's gone up by 150. But then we see that there's a drop. There's another key feature there where there's a kind of rise. Doesn't last very long. It drops again. And then it kind of rises before balancing out at approximately the same 200 at the end. So at the end, that's kind of another key feature that you really want to mention. There we go. We have it. So after we've highlighted all the key features, what we want to do is we want to have a look at an introduction. An introduction is very different to a task 2. What we want to do is we want to paraphrase the information given in the graph. Here we want to be specific. We want to give all of that information related to the gold, related to the sales, related to the millions. We want to give as much information as we can. And then we also want to include an overview. And it is really important that you do include an overview. If you don't include one, you will get penalized. You will fail in your task achievement. It will affect your overall score. Now, when we talk about an overview, what we're really talking about is we're not talking about 2 or 3 key features. We're talking about what's happening in the graph overall. And in this case, what do you think is happening in this graph overall? What would be the overall trend? If you take 2 or 3 steps back from this graph and look at it, where you can't really see the numbers, what would be the overall trend? Okay, so this is the introduction that I've written. I've said the diagram illustrates how gold sales in Dubai changed over a period of 12 months. And have a look at this overview. Can you see any problems with this overview? Can anybody see a problem with this overall trend? Yeah, somebody's put it there. Another said it. It's unchanged. Now, I took this actually from an IELTS book. Somebody had written it and said that this will get you a 9. But if we have a look at this overall trend, it's not even accurately written. So we've got overall gold sales in Dubai remained relatively unchanged. So that means, just from that overview, if I'm selling gold in Dubai, and now Sultan has said it does remain unchanged in the end. And so if I'm selling gold in Dubai and overall gold sales in Dubai remain relatively unchanged, what I would then be able to do is I'd be able to go on holiday in any month of the year because the gold sales don't change. However, by studying the graph in more detail, it is very clear that if I wanted to take a holiday and close my shop for a month, which month would be the best for me to take a holiday? I definitely wouldn't be wanting to take a holiday in March. Yeah, July or September. That would be a great time for me to leave, close down the shop. I'm only going to be missing out on approximately a countrywide share of 100 million. However, in March, I definitely want to be at my shop. I would definitely want to be at my best because that's where I'm going to be making the big bucks, the big money. So there obviously were many changes to gold sales. The fact that January and December have the same figures for gold doesn't mean that gold didn't remain changed. Now, somebody's asking me to show step 2 again. So step 2 is here. We're looking for the main key features. I hope that helps. And so overall gold sales in Dubai fluctuated greatly in 2002, with sales ranging from 100 to 350 million. And there you go. That would be more accurate overall trend. Yeah. So during the year, you can have a really good month. You can have a really bad month. If you're having a bad month, don't worry, especially if it's in July. Everybody's having a bad month. Lastly, what we want to do is write the body. So again, we're just putting together the key features that we just had a look at in part 2. And then what we're doing, we've already picked out the key feature. Now we're just going to add the meat to it. And we want to include figures, amounts, data. That's really important. If you have a look at the criteria, you will see that if you don't do that, you will be penalized. And then basically we start with one key feature, we beef it up, put on some meat, and then we move on to the next key feature, so on and so forth. And while paying attention to the tense, to the grammar of the graph. So let's have a look at this one here. Let's start with the first key feature. It is clear from the graph that in January, sales were at 200. And what's the missing word? Yeah, and guys, it's not millions, it's million. In Russian, when you count millions, there is a plural. In English, there is no plural. That will affect your vocabulary, grammar, whatever score. It's million with no S. And then if you have a look, this figure rose and peaked at 350 million in March. How did the figure rise? It wasn't instantaneous. It actually took 3 months or 2 months. It wasn't gradual. And I would go with something like significantly, or even little stronger, rapidly, dramatically. Yeah, there's a huge rise. So we really want to stress that. Yeah. And then from March to July, the situation turned quite grim with gold sales and again we need for a word before plummeting. Now Aidana said millions it's written in millions on the chart because it's in the plural. But as soon as you put one, it's no longer millions. It's 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. How many? Undescribed number, millions. Yeah, if it's uncountable, we're going to say millions. He's a millionaire. He's got millions. He's got millions of dollars, but we're not sure of the amount. But as soon as we know the amount, one, it becomes million. Yeah, so with gold sales plummeting, in which way? How did the gold sales plummet? It wasn't gradual, at least not in my opinion. Gradual would be what would be happening at the end. There's this kind of gradual increase, dramatically plummeting, yeah, or significantly plummeting. We couldn't use extremely. And bottoming out at just over 100 million. So obviously we could write about 4 sentences for this graph, and that would take us, that'd be all that we'd need, because that's what we highlighted as the 4 main key features. And now, sorry, all we're doing is we're giving more information. Now I understand we've kind of come to the end of the lesson. We don't really have time to get into all of the other details. I would have liked, maybe if we had a little bit more time, we could have looked at this a little bit in a little bit more detail. However, we are out of time here. So we're going to jump straight across to the quiz. No conclusion for task 2. For task 1. No need for a conclusion. Conclusion isn't required. Basically, what's happening is that you're putting the conclusion, the overview, in the first, in the introduction. Okay, let me just set up the quiz. Okay.